Okay, we're ready to rock and roll, I think. So, welcome. It's my pleasure to welcome those of you in person and on Zoom to Tales of the Sister City, an overview of queer Jewish-Palestinian relationships in Haifa. My name is Ron Loisel, a longtime member of Sha'ar Zahav. Founded in 1977, Sha'ar Zahav is San Francisco's only LGBTQ synagogue, embracing a diversity of individuals of all sexualities, genders, races, and abilities. Sha'ar Zahav welcomes a diversity of families, including single members, interfaith, single parent, and multicultural families. Following the presentation by our honored speaker, Dotan Bron, there will be time for questions and answers from both online and in-person participants. We ask that those questions be brief and respectful. For those of you on Zoom, please type your questions in the chat by clicking on New Chat. Don't click on the Everyone item. And when you do that, then click on Deborah, and the question will go to Deborah Levy. Another bit of housekeeping, a couple of housekeeping items. There's a photographer with us, so you'll see circulating, but I don't think anybody's going to get their face shot, but just FYI, Aaron is in the back taking some pictures. And for those of you online, actually now, can you please give Karen a thumbs up if you can hear okay? Karen is watching that the thumbs are up. Hopefully they are up. Those in person, the restrooms are just simply out that door. And I think that's it for the housekeeping. Before Sha'ar Zahav's Vice President, Patty Kaplan, introduces Dotan, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the co-sponsors of tonight's program. The San Francisco Haifa Sister City Committee, since 1973, has been an organization that fosters a relationship between our two great cities. The relationship facilitates cultural, educational, and business exchanges, celebrating shared values such as democracy, civic engagement, cultural diversity, and innovation. A Wider Bridge is an organization focused on building a strong relationship between LGBTQ communities in North America and Israel. Founded by Sha'ar Zahav member Arthur Slepian in 2010, A Wider Bridge advances LGBTQ inclusion in Israel through its work with Israeli LGBTQ NGOs. Finally, Queers Against Anti-Semitism, a program of A Wider Bridge, is a movement of queer activists who pledge to stand against anti-Semitism as it spreads across the globe. As a queer community, we know the weight of being targeted and marginalized solely because of our non-majority identities. Patty, would you please introduce Dotan?
Thank you, Ron. I'm pleased to introduce in more detail Dotan Bron. He is a PhD candidate at Tel Aviv University, researching the queer history of Haifa from the British Mandate through the 1990s. His previous work has examined the history of homosexuality in the kibbutz and Israel's dance scene. Dotan is the co-founder of the Haifa Queer History Project, a grassroots community archive and oral history initiative founded in 2015. He has also co-curated Israel's first museum exhibition on queer history, and he co-organizes Israel's only LGBTQ+ History Month festival held annually. Dotan is also a public historian, both as a certified tour guide and as a co-creator of the podcast Toldot HaMiniyut, The History of Sexuality, the leading podcast on queer history in Hebrew. Over the next 2 months, Dotan is a scholar in residence at the Hadassah Brandeis Institute in Boston. drawing on the papers of Marcia Friedman, one of Israel's pioneers of feminist and lesbian political organizing, housed at Brandeis University, as well as materials from several archives across the U.S. Dotan will write about the international networks that connected lesbian and feminist organizations in the U.S. with lesbian feminist activism in Israel during the 1970s and 1980s. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dotan Bron to our Sha'ar Zahav and San Francisco community.
Okay, so I want to begin with thanking Sha'ar Zahav, a wider bridge, and especially Ron. Where is he? He just went. And Ron, Ron Lazelle, for inviting and hosting me tonight. It's truly an honor to speak in a place with such a rich Jewish and LGBT history. After reading so much about San Francisco's queer history and after obsessing over Tales of the City TV miniseries, have you watched it? Yeah. In my early 20s, including more Tales of the City and further Tales of the City, naturally. I'm especially honored to be here myself and be able to present to you a bit of my beloved Haifa, your sister city. As Patty kindly presented me, my name is Dotan Bron. I'm a PhD candidate at Tel Aviv University's School of Historical Studies, where my research focuses on the queer history of Haifa from the 1930s through the 1990s. I'm also one of the founders of the Haifa Queer History Project, which is a grassroots community archive, well, as Patty told you. And we started back in 2015, and I've been co-heading it since. My PhD project is very much predicated on this decade-long endeavor. Besides conducting interviews and collecting and cataloging different kinds of archival material, from newspaper clippings through protocols of political organizations, erotic letters, and photos from, oh, you can share. Does it work? Is it connected? Yeah, okay. So yeah, this is Haifa. Maybe we'll get back to this. Yeah, and this is our project. Yeah, so I was talking about what we hold in the archive. Newspaper clippings through protocols of political organizations, erotic letters, photos from pride parades and paintings, and 2 items of clothing. The History Project also reaches out to the community. We organize an annual Queer History Festival, which is Israel's only LGBT history festival. That's 3 weeks of film screenings, talks, exhibitions, tours, and parties that celebrate our history all over the world. As part of this festival, I also had the privilege of co-curating Israel's first museum exhibition on LGBT history. Yeah, so this is the festival, some of the flyers, and that's the exhibition. So it was called "What Will the Neighbor Say?", which I think is very much a Haifa vibe kind of a sentence. And over there, over to the left, is the poster for the exhibition. Yeah, so it was a collaboration with the Haifa City Museum, and I'm happy to talk about all of this later in our conversation in the Q&A. In my talk tonight, I will discuss Jewish-Palestinian relations in 1990s Haifa, and even before. And before I begin, I feel I must acknowledge the reality back home. So the history of the Zionist-Palestinian conflict, as you surely know, is deeply contested. Many acts of violence have been committed on both sides in the past century or so. Yet over time, the relationship between Jews and Palestinians have moved further and further away from any sense of symmetry. This will become evident in my talk tonight, but it is also painfully visible in the present. October 7th was a shocking and terrible Shabbat for everyone in Israel, myself included. But the Israeli government's response, shamefully supported by many opposition leaders, has been horrific. I am appalled by the atrocities my government has inflicted upon Gaza, the West Bank, and the region, atrocities that, as some leading genocide and Holocaust scholars have already argued, may amount to genocide. Tonight, I return to a moment in history when it seemed that gay and lesbian communities might bridge national divisions and offer a kind of sexual, social, and political identification stronger than the national one. Unfortunately, today, such solidarity is quite rare. Many in Israel's LGBT+ community actively support the army's action in Gaza, and Israel continues to weaponize queer identities, demonizing international queer peace activists, many of whom Jewish, while pinkwashing its own actions by presenting itself as the only LGBT-friendly country in the Middle East. Hopefully, all of this, all the terrible experiences of the past 2 years are nearing its end. The living hostages, thankfully, have come home, and the Gazans are beginning to return to what is left of their homes, many of which have been destroyed. The ceasefire is fragile, but I truly hope it will hold. Still, the scale of loss and suffering has been immense, and we will be reckoning with the consequences of these past 2 years for decades to come. In the time ahead, we will need your help, and solidarity to push for a truly democratic Israel, one that we can all be proud of as Jews, as members of the LGBT community, and as human beings. And with this, let me jump into my talk. So if you know anything about Haifa, you probably know it is often described as a mixed city, a place, let me just pull Haifa again. Yeah, so I don't know how familiar you are with Haifa, but this is where it is located, to the north of the country. And this is a photo of Haifa during the British Mandate, when it had this, this was downtown Haifa. Today it's very different. Yeah, so it is described as a mixed city, a place where Jews and Palestinians live side by side. And that the city prides itself in being a beacon of coexistence. The reality, of course, is a bit more nuanced. Historians and sociologists, have written extensively about Jewish-Palestinian relations in Haifa, about coexistence and conflicts in labor struggles, municipal politics, business endeavors, architecture and culture. However, the city's history as a site for queer encounters across national and ethnic lines has been hitherto almost utterly neglected. Tonight, I'd like to try and shed some light on this particular history. At the center of my talk are 2 murder cases that occurred in Haifa in the 1990s and were sensationalized, in the Israeli press as homosexual murders. Both involved Jewish men and their younger Palestinian partners. These tragedies, though exceptional, reveal how economic pressures, changing sexual norms, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict intertwined in people's most private lives. While the parks and cruising grounds brought men together across national and social boundaries, they were not the only places where Jewish and Palestinian queers met. From the mid-1970s onwards, other spaces, feminist collectives, peace movements, and community organizing became meeting points for queer women and men, both Jewish and Arab. I will address these spaces later in my talk. To understand the relationships that developed in 1970s and 1990s Haifa, we need to look a bit further back. Sexual encounters between Jews and Arabs were reported in the Hebrew press already during the British Mandate. As historian Ofri Ilani discussed, there were representations of male same-sex intercourse in the Hebrew press in the Mandatory Palestine, in which sodomy was perceived and portrayed as Oriental vice, rooted in Zionist beliefs that it was endemic, not only Zionist, but also British beliefs, that it was endemic to the Middle East and innate in Arab men. Sexual liaisons between Ashkenazi Jews and Arabs, or Mizrahi Jews, were described in a way that highlighted the degenerative influence of intermingling with Arabs, potentially leading to being infected with the desire for sodomy, which is like, why not, right? After the 1948 war, the segregation between Jewish and Palestinian societies deepened. Although intergroup sexual relations continued in mixed cities like Haifa, Israel's 1967 occupation of the West Bank facilitated an increase in these interactions. The Iraqi-born Jewish gay activist Yehuda Sofer conducted a series of interviews in the 1970s, documenting the sexual lives of Palestinian and Mizrahi Jewish men who had sex with men. Typically, these men did not self-identify as gay. Many were married to women and predominantly insisted on taking the penetrative role in sexual intercourse. According to some interviewees, being penetrated was viewed as both a personal and national humiliation, particularly for Arab men penetrated by Jewish partners. Haifa, as a mixed city, offers a unique case for examining cross-national sexual and romantic relationships. For instance, in the early 1960s, both Arab and Jewish men engaged with pre-transition Jewish and transgender sex workers. So you can see over to the left, Gila Goldstein. For those of you who are maybe more familiar with the Israeli history, she's like an icon of transness in Israel. She's no longer with us, but she was one of the most famous transgender women in Israel. To the right, I don't know why we have these green marks, but it doesn't matter. You can see fine. So to the right, this is Nancy Schneider, also a very iconic trans woman. Both of them originally from Haifa. And I will talk about the figure in the middle in a second. Yeah, so I told you that men engaged with them when they were still pre-transitioned as sex workers. And a key site for such interactions was the city's cruising grounds. In the early 1970s, Mahmoud Riyad, which is the figure in the middle, an Arab transgender woman from Deir el-Assad, became a notable figure there. Riyad, who had various jobs, including goat herding, bakery work, and belly dancing, also engaged in sex work, presumably with Jewish clients. By the way, she also went by a Hebrew name. She calls herself Naomi, and I guess it was useful to present herself sometimes as Palestinian, sometimes as Jewish, according to the situation. Riyad, as well as other sex workers, met their clients in Haifa's cruising grounds. The term cruising, as I'm sure you know, denotes the search for casual sex, usually between men in public places. Throughout the 20th century, men cruised in city streets, parks, beaches, public restrooms, cinemas, and backrooms of bars. Some of these spaces were designed for quick, anonymous encounters. Others, like parks or shorelines, allowed for longer conversations, friendships, or regular social circles to form. In Haifa, cruising in public parks dated back to at least the late mandatory period. Then, it happened in Binyamin Park, which is this park, established already in 1923 as part of the Hadar Carmel, Haifa's first Zionist neighborhood. The larger Memorial Park, or Gan HaZikaron, is placed where the kind of pink circle is. Inaugurated in 1953 to commemorate fallen Jewish soldiers, became the central cruising ground of the city by the late 1950s or early 60s. Memorial Park is located in the intersection of 4 neighborhoods. Directly above it lies, so I say above because Haifa is on a mountain, so we usually give directions with above and below. Directly above it lies Hadar Carmel. So just above it is Hadar Carmel, which is the circle down below. And to the west is Wadi Nisnas, which is to the rectangle to the left, which is a Palestinian neighborhood. And to the east is Wadi Salib. This is the circle, the whitish circle to the right, which originally was a Muslim neighborhood whose Palestinian residents were displaced in 1948 and replaced with Jewish immigrants, many from North Africa. In one of Israel's most dramatic protests, let me just go to the protest. Yeah. In one of Israel's most dramatic protests, these North African immigrants rioted in the summer of 1959. Consequently, the neighborhood was gradually evacuated of its inhabitants, leaving a large area near the park filled with abandoned houses, which also became sites for cruising. So below the park was the Ottoman Kasbah, but we also saw in the beginning the big picture of Mandate Haifa. This was destroyed by the IDF after the city was conquered in 1948, as you can see in this picture, in Operation Shikmona. So on a plot on the former Kasbah, the municipality constructed a public park, which likewise became a site for cruising and prostitution. And this Kasbah was in the pink rectangle, which is downtown Haifa. This positioned Memorial Park as a center for cruising, linking it to Binyamin Park, the deserted Wadi Salib, downtown Haifa. So yeah, a good place in the middle. It was also conveniently positioned on the seam line between Haifa's main Jewish and Palestinian neighborhoods. So Adar Carmel, on the circle below is a Jewish neighborhood, and Wadi Salib is a Mizrahi Jewish neighborhood, Wadi Nisnas is a Palestinian neighborhood, and downtown Haifa is a mixed neighborhood. So you got all kinds of different people. So historically, I was asked, for Zoom people, I was asked about the division between Christians and Muslims. Historically, Wadi Nisnas was a Christian neighborhood and Wadi Salib was a Muslim neighborhood. But after 48, all the Palestinians in Haifa were concentrated in Wadi Nisnas and then gradually returned to other neighborhoods. So now everything is basically mixed. There are neighborhoods with more Christians or more Muslims, but essentially everything is mixed. Yeah, so let me just show you a couple of pictures. So this is the plot where Memorial Garden is located today. This is before they built the garden. And yeah, this is also from the British Mandate. And you can see that it overlooks the downtown. This place used to be where in the 18th century, we had a fortress, like a small fort, yes, a small one, on this plot, kind of governing the city from above. Just love this picture. And this is the same plot in 48 when it was briefly a military base. So what you see just across it is the British court of law that they built there during the British Mandate. And this is Memorial Park when it was just inaugurated in 1953. And of course, slowly the trees grew, the bushes grew, and it became more suitable for cruising than in its initial state. Yeah, and this is the memorial within the park. And one of the nicer things is when we interviewed for the project Nancy Schneider, she told us about when she and the other trans women, they were a gang and they used to do like drag shows for themselves on the memorial. So yeah, that's cute. Interviews with Jewish men and newspaper articles portray Haifa's park cruising scene in the 1990s as social rather than merely sexual. Patrons often gave each other nicknames, developed inside jokes, and even called the public telephone, so it was a paid telephone, in the park to see who was present in the evening. And, they would call like, yeah, should I come? Who's in tonight? Yeah, like that. All accounts of social gatherings in the cruising scene exclusively mention Jews. Still, Palestinians were engaging in cruising for sex as well. A Palestinian high school student from the Galilee wrote about several visits to Haifa's cruising parks in a letter he sent to an advice column published in Asinara, and this is what you see over here. An independent Arabic newspaper printed in Nazareth, culminating with a sexual encounter with a Jewish young man. Even though Jews and Palestinians shared the parks, social circles within it seem to have been segregated, and interactions between the groups were generally confined to casual sex. And yet, within this segregated reality, a handful of relationships emerged that were more sustained. And it's precisely in these rare, intimate connections though we can glimpse into the intersection of sex, class, and politics in the city. Some of those stories ended up in friendship, but as you will soon see, not all of them. Yeah, so others ended in tragedy, and more specifically in murder. Between 1975 and 2000, Israel witnessed a series of murders that were labeled as homosexual murders by the media. I was able to document 23 such cases where sufficient details were available to confirm the incidents. Of these, 8 murders, including 1 double murder, occurred in Haifa, in or around Haifa. The murders in Haifa share certain characteristics. All victims but 1 were Jewish, and except for 1 Jewish murderer, all the murderers were Palestinians. In all cases where the ages are known, the victims were older than their perpetrators, sometimes in significant margin. The ages of the victims range from 22 to 60, whereas the ages of the murderers ranged from 15 to 34. In all cases, there was evidence of sexual relationship between the murderer and the victim, or at the very least, sexual relations were implied or used as a lure in the context of the murder. In more than half the cases, the killer and victim were reported to know each other for at least several months prior to the murder. In what follows, I detailed 2 murder cases connected to Haifa's cruising grounds. These killings are significant not only because the interactions between Jewish victims and Arab perpetrators highlight the connections between the Jews and Palestinians, but also because they provide a substantial glimpse into the lives of victims and their acquaintances. So the first one is the murder of Yosef Malkin in 1990. In December 1990, the body of Yosef Malkin was found in his apartment in Adar Carmel. His throat had been cut, and on his face lay a note written in Arabic: "A black snake raises this scum." Signed, Fatah. At first, the killing looked like an act of nationalist terrorism. But neighbors told the police of the Palestinian men often visited Malkin's apartment, and soon another story began to emerge. Aaron, who is one of our interviewees and a friend of Malkin, recalled. Malkin spoke French and always came to the park, and we became friends because we shared the French language. He was the same age as me. He would bring home 3, 4, 5 Arabs from the villages, from the territories, 5 at once in his house. I would say to him, "What, are you crazy? No, they are cute and nice. I give them 10 shekel each, and that's it. And we have an orgy together. Everything is fine." He was murdered. And it was in the newspapers and everything. Yossi Malkin. He was a very interesting engineer, intelligent. Intelligent people always have this obsession with bringing 5 Arabs from the territories into the apartment. Since I live in Haifa, I have never brought anyone home. Nobody, because I'm still traumatized by this Yossi Malkin. The police first arrested Mohammed Mugharbe, a Palestinian shawarma seller from Haifa, whom Malkin had taken in as a teenager. They'd lived together for years. Malkin was more than 30 years older, and he'd helped raise Mugharbe, who later married and lived just a few streets away. The two remained close, and it was Mugharbe who discovered the body. At first, he was suspected. The note, the intimacy, the gossip, but within weeks, the police cleared him. By March 1991, 2 Palestinian teenagers from the village of Aqaba were arrested and convicted. They told interrogators they killed Malkin to prove their loyalty to Fatah's student movement called Al-Shabiba. Still, Malkin was not entirely a random victim. The Haifa district attorney claimed Malkin was targeted by the youths because they already knew him. The reenactment of the murder revealed that Malkin, sorry, I have this also in a quote. Oh no, that's not the someone, sorry. So the reenactment of the murder revealed that Malkin led them into his house without fear, invited them to coffee, and at their request, played a karate film on the TV. Later, Masri, which is one of the killers, took their picture, and the three massaged each other. It is clear that Malkin's murderers were familiar with Haifa's cruising grounds, whether as patrons of cruising for sex or through hearsay. They also had a prior connection with their victim, likely having visited Malkin's apartment before. The homoerotic undertones of the murder reenactment are apparent as well. Given the killer's stated motive and the note found on the scene, it is quite possible that Malkin's murder was both a homosexual murder and a nationalistic murder at the same time. 7 years later, in December 1997, another killing took place in Haifa. Igal Magor, a 42-year-old insurance agent, was found dead in his apartment in Denya neighborhood. For those of you who know Haifa, this is like a posh, very posh neighborhood next to the university. He'd been stabbed more than 100 times. His killer was Shadi Sha'aban, a 21-year-old Palestinian from Sakhnin. Local newspapers reported that Almagor and Sha'aban had a close, possibly intimate relationship for about 3 months. Sha'aban claimed self-defense, saying Almagor had attacked him sexually. But the story didn't end there. Almagor's murder and his coverage by the press provide a broader glimpse into the history of Jewish-Palestinian relationships in Haifa beyond his death. Kolbo, which is a local newspaper, noted that Almagor was known to cruise around Memorial Park in his car, a common strategy for those who wish to avoid being seen inside the park, usually wealthier, sometimes married men. It was there that he met his close friend Jalal, who also paid tribute to him in his funeral. The relationship between Almagor and Jalal lasted about 2.5 years and is defined by the article as a platonic friendship. Yeah. However, the socioeconomic gap is noticeable, and so is the unstated sexual or romantic undertone, as you can see in this quote. According to the young man, this quote from the newspaper. According to the young man, Almagor gave him more attention than his biological father. Whether these were soul-searching conversations that he had never had with anyone, or whether they were small gifts that were given to him from time to time, clothes, souvenirs from abroad. He once asked me if I was with him only because of his money, says the young man. I answered him that in the society that I am in, I have never met a person like him. The article, interestingly, sheds light on the social dynamics in the park. The narrative constructs Almagor and Jalal as opposites. Almagor is Jewish, Jalal is Palestinian. Almagor is older, Jalal is younger. Almagor has means, Jalal comes from a poor family with many children and accepts Almagor's gifts. While Almagor is described as someone who was very close to his brother and his family, although he did hid the secret of his sexual orientation from them, Jalal, and that's a quote, severed his ties with his family. In this respect, Almagor's relationship with Jalal bears a resemblance to Malkin's and Murarbe's. Another shared aspect of both relationship is the paternal role of Malkin and Almagor. As I have mentioned before, Malkin was reported to have taken Murarbe under his wing when the latter was just 14 years old. While it's doubtful that this constituted a formal adoption, it's plausible that Malkin framed their bond as a paternal one, considering his age of 35 at the time. In historical context, lacking legal or socially accepted frameworks for non-heterosexual relationships, adoption served as a practical means of solidifying such bonds. Similarly, Almagor was portrayed by the media as a father figure to Jalal, particularly after the latter distanced himself from his biological parents. Both Palestinian men are significantly younger than their Jewish counterparts and lack familiar support and financial resources. Despite crossing national boundaries radically, the paternal metaphor appears to have aided newspaper writers and perhaps their readers in comprehending these unusual relationships. The cases of Malkin and Almagor, though exceptional, were not isolated. Across many of the stories I collected, we see recurring patterns. An older, often middle-class Jewish man, a younger Palestinian man or teenager, and a bond that mixed sex, care, money, and dependence. To understand these connections, we need to think about two intertwined frameworks, one economic, the other cultural. First, the economic one. When Malkin gave his visitors 10 shekels, first the economic one, yeah. When Malkin gave his visitors 10 shekels each, or when Almagor bought clothes and gifts for Jalal, these gestures were not necessarily acts of simple generosity. They belonged to long-standing pattern within queer and straight cultures alike, what's often called a sugar daddy relationship. The term might sound contemporary or even playful, but at its core, it refers to powerful dynamic. An older, wealthier person providing material support in exchange for compensation, for companionship or sex. It's a form of sex work, though it's not always recognized as such. In Haifa, where Palestinian youths often faced economic hardships and discrimination, especially those from West Bank without Israeli citizenship, the logic of the sugar daddy took on particular force. A teenager or a younger man might come to the city for work, find himself without a place to stay, and accepted the hospitality of an older man who offered money, housing, or food. Sometimes genuine affection developed, sometimes it was purely transactional. For time's sake, let me skip a bit, but basically in this part of the talk, the argument that I wanted to make is that the murder cases offer us a glimpse into a phenomenon that was probably much vaster than the ones that ended in murder. Probably in most cases, it ended in just, some kind of a transactional relationship where young Palestinians from the villages in the Galilee or from the West Bank arrived in Haifa with no support from the family. They had to face a very difficult job market, especially as Palestinians, especially without Israeli citizens for those who came from the West Bank. And they found that people could pick them up in the gardens and provide them, shelter or, yeah, okay. And in the beginning, it was easier, but as the gay community or the LGBT community became more present in the media, it was harder for them to justify, for themselves what they were doing, because homophobia also grew with this presentation in the media. And when after the first Intifada, and during these years, when political relations became more and more severe, it was also harder to kind of hold these relationships. And at several times, as we've seen, they ended in violence and sometimes even murder. Let me skip a bit to connections in other areas. So, as we've discussed, the political landscape of post-1967 Israel and Palestine was changing rapidly. I'd like to now move to the realm of from the realm of intimate encounters to activism, where this period saw a new form of feminist, peace, and gay and lesbian organizing become important arenas for Jewish-Palestinian relations. The second half of the 1970s was a formative period of political organizing in Israel, with the establishment of the Women's Liberation Movement in 1971, in Haifa, by the way, and the Aguda, Israel's first gay rights organization, in 1975. At that time, neither organization included Palestinian members. Yet during those same years, a Jewish-Arab peace group called Shutfut, or Shutafut Partnership, emerged, a local branch of the American co-counseling movement. Haifa was a major hub for its activity. Many of Shutfut's Jewish participants were gay men, some of them openly so, and the group became an early meeting place where sexuality and political partnership intersected. Beginning in 1987, feminist and peace activism became central arenas for encounters between Jews and Palestinians. The connections between Shutfut and the feminist movement grew stronger, particularly after the outbreak of the First Intifada, when the feminist center Isha Leisha, an organization founded in 1983 by the women who were active in the women's liberation movement of the 1970s, decided to focus more directly on collaboration with Arab women and on anti-occupation work. A first group of Arab volunteers formed around the Rape Crisis Center, and new initiatives such as the Women in Black and the Coalition of Women for Peace sought to bring Jewish and Palestinian women together in a joint struggle against patriarchy, the occupation, and for peace. Lesbian activism soon joined this network of feminist and peace movements. Also in 1987, CLAF, the lesbian feminist community, was founded, providing a space for women who loved women within the feminist framework. In Haifa, CLAF's activities took place within Isha Leisha, which meant that Jewish lesbians and Palestinian feminists shared both physical and political space. Many women who loved women were also active in Women in Black and the Women's Peace movement. These encounters were rarely simple. Palestinian women often faced conservative and patriarchal resistance within their own communities and feared that association with lesbians might undermine their credibility and the legitimacy of the work with and for Arab women. Similar concerns existed also with straight Jewish feminists, but to a lesser degree. Still, these exchanges, sometimes tense, sometimes transformative, laid the groundwork for solidarity between Jewish and Palestinian feminists and between lesbian and straight activists. At the beginning of the 1990s, two additional developments reshaped Haifa's political and sexual landscapes. The first was the emergence of the autonomous Palestinian frameworks, including the feminist organization Kayan, founded in Haifa. Yeah. It just flew from me, the Arabic name, by Palestinian women who were active in Isha Leisha and wanted to have their own space. Kayan became a sister organization to Isha Leisha and operated on the same building. The second development was the growth of the gay and lesbian organizing followed the 1988 repeal of the law criminalizing same-sex sex, male same-sex sex. Haifa's branch of the Aguda, remember Israel's LGBT organization, established soon after and in what is known as Israel's gay decade, it's between 88 and 98. The branch was overwhelmingly Jewish, but included at least 3 openly gay Palestinian men, a remarkable fact for that time. One of the Palestinian, I'm nearing the end. Don't give up, don't give up. One of the Palestinian participants in the Haifa branch of the Aguda was Walid. This is not his real name, originally from Nazareth. There, he even met a Jewish boyfriend, and the two dated for a while. They were one of several such relationships that emerged within the organization. In an interview, Walid reflected on his ambivalent experience as a Palestinian man in that predominantly Jewish space. He recalled feeling that Arab men were welcome through, but also sexualized and exoticized. And that's a quote, "I always felt exotic, like I was the exotic boyfriend. That was generally the attitude towards Arabs. The gay Jewish men in Haifa saw us as exotic, as men they desired because we were exotic." In the late 1990s, however, this fragile inclusiveness began to fade. In 1999, the Aguda's local branch was replaced by the Haifa Forum, whose atmosphere was less welcoming to Arab participants, especially those with political awareness. The outbreak of the Second Intifada in October 2000 deepened this segregation. When Walid returned to Haifa in 2001, after several years away, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. He attended one meeting of the newly formed Haifa Forum and left halfway through. "I had just come back to Haifa and found a job," he recalled. I went to one meeting, and the topic was how to represent Israel to the world, because everyone is supposedly against us. I got up in the middle of the meeting and left, and I never went back. I knew that our paths had diverged. Interestingly, and this is really the end, interestingly, it was the feminist sphere that managed to sustain dialogue across these divisions. In 2003, Haifa witnessed the creation of Aswat, Voices, the first Palestinian lesbian organization under the auspices of Kayan. And this is from Sha'ar in the 80s, and this is a flyer by Aswat. It says in Arabic, Ya Siti, harari aqlek, which means, Grandma, free your mind. And you can see, the more traditional grandma, and she wears like this mask, to be, affected by the queerness of her granddaughter. Yeah, so Aswat worked to transform attitudes within Palestinian society towards women in general and towards lesbians and queers more broadly in particular. Some of its members spoke publicly about their sexuality and published Arabic language feminist lesbian magazine, along with political pamphlets like this one, and anthologies of lesbian literature in Arabic. Aswat also forged connection with LGBT organizations in Lebanon and elsewhere in the Arab world, positioning itself within a broader regional movement. At the same time, the group struggled to create space for Palestinian queers within Israel without relinquishing its national identity or its commitment to ending the occupation. Aswat became part of Haifa's coalition of women's organization, which also, as you remember, included Isha Isha and Klaf. Though independent, these groups maintained solidarity with one another, and a good example is Isha Isha's public call for solidarity with Aswat, published in 2007. Yeah, so the sense of openness that once prevailed has given way to a more conservative political climate, both locally and globally. Such a moment demands renewed solidarity within the queer community itself and among all groups resisting the rise of the right. In the Haifa Queer History Project, we strive to amplify Palestinian voices through oral histories, archival collection, and our annual festival, which we try to create cooperations, of our organization and a local Palestinian queer organization. And finally, I would like to close this very long talk in the way that the great gay Jewish San Franciscan, the late Harvey Milk, used to open. My name is Dotan Bron, and I'm here to recruit you. I want to invite you to stand with us in resisting the resurgence of nationalism and homophobia in Israel and elsewhere, in building Jewish-Palestinian partnership, and in transforming Israel into a truly democratic state, one that does not occupy another people, that ensures equality for all its citizens, and that allows freedom in all its sexual, gender, cultural, religious, ethnic, and national constellations. In my current research, I have been exploring the connections between Israeli and North American lesbian feminist movements in the 1970s and 80s. And among the materials I have found is a letter written jointly by Dalia Zaks, a Jewish lesbian, and Nabila Espagnoli, a Palestinian feminist. And they published this in the American Jewish feminist journal Bridges. Together, they wrote about their feminist peace activism in Haifa. And these are precisely the bridges we need to rebuild. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Dotan. We've got about 35 minutes for Q&A, and I'm going to take the first question, and it's not directly related to your presentation. I'm sure the other questions will be, but Dotan, I want to make sure you don't leave our community without me getting a sense here. You and your partner, Barak, have been in San Francisco on your first visit for about 30 hours. What are your early observations about the geography and the culture of our city as compared to Haifa?
Okay.
Is it on?
Oh, on? Now do you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You're answering the question.
Yeah. So first of all, I was lucky enough to be guided by Mike here, Mike Shriver and Ron, and run through the city. And first of all, you have a beautiful city, and I'm struck by the architecture and nature and the color of the houses. But of course, you have these the staples of Haifa, which is the sea and the mountain, right? So this we have going. Yeah, and somewhat maybe weirdly, the nature feels a bit similar. So eucalyptuses are ubiquitous in Israel, and you see them all over right here. And yeah, I don't know, nature kind of feels similar, but also very different. Yeah, it's a limbo kind of thing.
Yofi, thank you. So Deborah, do you have a question from online that you'd like to start with, or we can start in-house? Do you have? Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes, the only way you can ask the question on Zoom is to please put your question in chat the way I instructed you, and you've got to click on Deborah. For those who ask the question in-house, you'll need to come up and speak into that microphone, directly into the microphone. So Zoom folks, all right, Deborah, so go to the mic, please, with the question.
You can utilize the podium that is free now. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, no, oh, all right, that's great. Okay, great, thanks. All right. Is it possible that the reason that all the sensationalized murders you discussed were of Jewish men by Palestinians, because had Palestinian gay men be murdered by Jewish men, those might not have been covered by the press or been of concern to the police? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So definitely you find difference between the Hebrew and Arabic newspapers. So I'm asking to you because you're
To there,
them.
actually.
Hi. Okay, so you definitely find it's weird to talk to the camera. I'm not trained in this. Yeah, you definitely find differences between the Hebrew and Arabic newspapers, and Hebrew newspapers cover much more of these killings than the Arabic newspapers. But I think what's even what might be a good example to think of it through is that the most sensational murder was one that was actually murdered by another Jew. So we didn't talk of it today, but in 1994, Yoshua Demner, who was a chemist, not chemist, electrical engineering professor in the Technion, who was also HIV positive. He was murdered. Eventually, they found out it was another Jew, and he had. They found in his apartment albums of photos of different, like 500 men, naked, of course. And the police went on, and they told to the press, that he's well, they called him male prostitute. Of course, he paid money, he didn't receive money, but the police. And this was super sensationalized over the media. I even found in archives in other places in the world articles about this specific case. So yeah, that's just an example of what happened in another context when it's not a Palestinian and a Jew. Hopefully it's an answer.
Question in-house? Mark, do you want to go to the mic, please?
Thank you for your presentation and your research. I found the male-male relationships that you described to be quite problematic, troubling, and frankly abusive. I am wondering if in your research you have discovered Jewish-Palestinian male-male relationships that would be considered more healthy?
Yeah, definitely. So as I told, thank you for your question. As I told about Walid, if you maybe I skipped this, but I told you that Walid met a boyfriend at the Aguda branch in Haifa, and this was a short-lived relationship, but it was definitely a normative relationship, and as I mentioned, they were not the only one. So there were several such couples, and it's not only history because we still have to this day Jewish-Palestinian couples in Haifa. Not many, but one of our interviewees in the project was a major activist in the 1980s and 1990s. He's married to a Palestinian and they have a kid together. So definitely, yeah, you also have these kinds of stories. What I'm interested about these other stories is that they're less known. So for me as a historian, it's kind of, they open up a history that was not known before. Maybe, when presenting Haifa to people who don't know it, it is important. So thank you for your question. It's important to present all kinds of, but academically, these stories interest me more.
Are they raising their child Jewish, Christian, Muslim?
That's
Just
a good
curious.
question. I don't know.
Okay.
So the child came from a relationship of the Jewish partner with a woman before their marriage. But I actually don't know. It's a good question.
It's a little bit related. So here someone's asking, given the past 2 years, to talk about the current relationships in Haifa or elsewhere in Israel, queer relationships, and in particular, is there a gay presence in Standing Together, Omdim B'Yachad, or any of the other shared society? Do we see normative relationships there?
Yeah. Well, where do I begin? Let me begin before. Talk to the camera. Let me begin before these past 2 years. So I feel that since the Second Intifada, gradually, and also with the development of queer Palestinian spaces, there's a growing segregation between the Jewish scene and the Palestinian scene, and the Palestinian scene now has the coolest party lines in Haifa. Generally speaking, like in Haifa, the coolest people are like the Palestinian hipsters, and so they have their own party lines and their own cultural events, and it has become generally more segregated. But there are different collaborations. So there are groups, Palestinian groups, that would not work with Jews at all. So they support BDS or these kinds of politics, and there are other groups that do work together. So there's like sorry, the camera. There's this diversity. And definitely Standing Together. I don't know, are you all familiar with Standing Together?
Very briefly, say what Standing Together is.
Yeah, it's a joint Palestinian Jewish organization, movement, actually better than organization, that does activism for social justice, peace activism, these kind of things. And they have branches, chapters all over the country, also of course, in Haifa, where they also have a local movement that ran for the municipality. And one of the members, council member, you would say, I guess, is actually a woman from this, elected from this movement, a Palestinian woman. And of course, there's a large queer presence within this movement, also in Haifa, and they also support a lot the local queer. So we have a local queer organization that is like a separate independent organization called the Haifa Rainbow. And there's a lot of connections and support between these two movements.
Yeah, please, come on up to the mic.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I guess I just have a general question about the politics of language in the queer community. To what extent people speak Hebrew or Arabic or I guess, Russian or any English or any other kind of language that are spoken in Haifa?
Thank you. That's a very good question because Russian is a very important language in Haifa. Haifa, nominally, you say? How you say? Nominally, was the city that absorbed the largest amount of former USSR immigrants. So there's a lot of Russian, especially in the neighborhood where we live, and there are actually queer Russian-speaking groups, and now there's also like an insurgence of both Ukrainians and people who fled from Putin's Russia into Israel. And so it's interesting, there are these 1990s Russian-speaking groups and there are newer Russian-speaking groups, and there's a whole scene like drag performance line in Russian. It's a whole thing. The sad thing is the usually people, Jews who were raised in Israel usually don't speak Russian or Arabic. A lot of the newcomers speak only Russian and English. And yeah, basically the Palestinians are the only one who speak fluently both Arabic and Hebrew. So the Hebrew-speaking spaces, or sometimes there are English-speaking spaces, would be the most inclusive ones, let's say, just because the people usually don't have the ability to, most Jews don't have the ability to participate in Arabic-speaking spaces or Russian-speaking spaces. Yeah.
So here's an interesting comment. I don't know what language they were speaking, but somebody here is sharing that he spent 3 months in Haifa in 1969.
Wow.
And there was a kind of salon hosted by the French consul for
Yes.
gay men. We've included a Palestinian. Yeah, you want to
Yes.
say more?
No, that's the whole story. But
Okay,
yeah,
that's the-
but that's a brilliant remark. And please ask him if he would be willing to interview about this.
Oh,
To be interviewed to the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you are willing to be interviewed, hit me up later. I'll be very happy to talk to you.
Deborah, do you have a question at hand or?
Well, there is a question. And you have a question, Danny.
Danny, let's go to Danny.
Go ahead, Danny.
Here, bring the mic.
Yeah, here, how can we do this?
Get it, yeah.
Something jumped out at me from your talk. You went over it really quickly, but it jumped out at me. And I don't know if there are any other Berkeley people here, but when I was first a graduate student at Berkeley in the late 80s and early 90s, we started one of the first queer groups at any Hillel in the United States. And the program director at Berkeley Hillel at the time, who was instrumental in helping us start the group, and the people from the Israeli consulate who also were shlichim and who also helped us start the
Danny,
program.
please get to the question.
Sorry, the program director that I'm thinking of, he was very involved. He was a student of Ricky Sharover Marcuse, and he was very involved in the co-counseling movement in the Bay Area. And you mentioned that there was a connection between queerness and the co-counseling movement in Haifa.
Yeah, the co-counseling. Yeah,
So
definitely.
I wanted to know if you could say a little more about that.
Yeah, so I actually don't know a lot about this, and I'm I'm not that familiar with the American side of the history of the co-counseling movement. But in Israel, they adopted the model. Sorry, no, I'm asking Danny. In Israel, they adopted the model. Deborah, could you move a bit so I can, just see Danny? They adopted the model for this Shutfut movement. There was a peace movement that Jews and Palestinians participated in together, and they did all kinds of like activities for children, summer camps, but also regular programming. And just, I don't know why exactly. We can, we can have all kinds of presumptions. But a lot of the people who were active, a lot of the men who were active in this movement were actually gay men. And there was at least one in Haifa that was out, and it was like kind of known and kind of, you know, colored the activity. But yeah, that's kind of the whole I know about the story. Thank you.
Deborah, do you have?
Now you're coming back to me, I know.
It's okay. We can go.
Is there another one?
Another question?
Here we go.
Oh, okay.
I got it. Okay, thank you, though. Can you comment? There's a lot of little details, right? Okay, can you comment on LGBT Ethiopian Jews?
Yeah. So not to the camera, not particularly in Haifa, but there is this group that in a way sprang out of IGI, which is the Israeli gay youth organization. It's LGBT, whatever, but the kind of the name was initially from the word gay. And yeah, there's this group called Kala, which is Israel's initials for Kihila Lahatabit Ethiopic, like an Ethiopian LGBT community. And they ran for several years, and they were basically a social group that allowed Ethiopian LGBT, mostly youths, or young adults to meet, to kind of share experiences, and yeah, and then they sort of dismantled, and now there's like kind of a Kala 2.0 group running, and some of the people that were active in the first one are kind of, you know, leading them. Actually, one of my earlier boyfriends, so before Barak, was active in this group, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore. But yeah, so I know some of it, you know, through his experiences.
Another question in-house? Yeah, please.
That's another hyphen right there.
Again, thank you very much. So my question, first of all, I wanted to say that I'm very heartened to hear, as somebody who was born and grew up in Haifa, and I moved to school, and then I moved to the United States, and I never knew any, and I think I told you, I knew nobody who was gay when I grew up in Haifa. So I'm actually very heartened to hear that. I'm also heartened to hear, as an Israeli American, how diverse is the scene nowadays in Israel. So let's remember that we're very lucky that we live there. Well, that there's such a diversity in Israel, as much criticism that we can have a lot of what's happening. And I just want to emphasize that. And that's what I'm telling all my American friends. But my question to you was more about the Palestinians. What's the acceptance nowadays of LGBTQ relationship, or just in general, among the Palestinian? And do you see the difference between the Palestinians who are Israeli citizens and the ones in the West Bank? And frankly, Gaza, even though we know who rules Gaza. So can you elaborate more on that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I'm a historian, and we have to, they take our card if we answer questions about the present. So no, but yeah, I'm not a Palestinian, and it will be hard for me to answer. But what I can say is what I see, you know, from social media and stuff like that, that there's definitely more social groups, political organizing within the Palestinian society. So now I think I can think of several. So there's Bet El Mim and the Al Qaus, both like big organizations that work. And in Gaza, there's I think Ward. I think WARD is a group that for LGBT Palestinians that works in Gaza, and I have a friend in Haifa who is very out, and he works in this. Well, we have a cultural center, Jewish Arab Cultural Center in Haifa, and he works there. And he was actually invited to talk, on TV to kind of debate, someone with more traditional views about this issue. So I think it is definitely Palestinian society is definitely more traditional than most of the Jewish. Let's see. Most of the Palestinian society is more traditional than the most of the Israel society. But I think there is progress. But yeah, it's from my outside perspective.
This is another one a little more about the present, but just from your proximity and familiarity with the Palestinian community. How do gay Palestinians view Hamas? Do you have anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know what's the Venn diagram between gayness and support or not supporting Hamas or any other political group within the Palestinian spectrum. I guess probably there are people who do support and people who do not support. Yeah, I don't have any statistics about that.
Please, Aaron. Aaron is making his way to the mic.
Hello. Can you talk about the modern queer cruising scene in Haifa between Israelis and Palestinians, both in the years kind of leading up to?
Can you speak just
Yeah.
a little slower?
Can you repeat it a
Forgive me.
little slower? Yeah.
Can you talk about the modern queer cruising scene in
Mhm.
Haifa between Israelis and Palestinians, both in the years leading up to and after October 7? I have a few questions to preface that. Does that same kind of older Israeli, younger Palestinian cruising scene that you talked about kind of continue as the norm? Do queer Israelis still kind of exoticize queer Palestinians? And is there any interaction between Israelis and Palestinians on queer dating apps?
Okay, a lot of questions. So let me begin by saying that cruising is under attack for a lot of years now. And basically the parks, all the bushes were trimmed and there are spotlights everywhere. So the scene of park cruising is almost, it's not entirely dead, but it's almost dead in Israel in general, much like a lot of time before October 7th. So I don't think, this specific event has influenced specifically the cruising scene. Yeah. So you asked about I'm not sure that the relations that I described were the norm. I guess there were all kinds of cruising and sex between Jews and Palestinians, and I don't say that the norm is older Jewish men and younger Palestinians. I just say that this is one of the patterns, and this particular pattern that ended up in the murders. I guess there were a lot of other types of relationships that did not end in violence, So this is my second remark. And definitely there are tons of Palestinians and Jews on apps on Haifa. And and one of the things that I did when I was still learning Arabic was to go on Grindr and just have conversations in Arabic in a way to practice the language. So definitely you can do that in Haifa.
Sure,
Yeah.
Dotan. Yeah. Gilad, did you have a question?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for your interesting speech or lecture. I noticed that there are a separation between the Arabs within the Israel, the citizens of Israel, the Arab citizens of Israel,
Mhm.
and the Palestinians. You call them in your lecture, you called all of them Palestinians, while it is much more complicated than this. There are Christians, Muslims, and even within the Christians, there are Catholics and Greek, and so on. And
Mhm.
it's very complicated. But the point is that there is a cultural separation going on, or there was a cultural separation between the Palestinians from the West Bank and the Arab Israelis or the Palestinians from within Israel. At what point, or can you explain how this process influenced the gay scene, the Palestinian, the Arab-Israeli gay scene? Did they? Can you notice? Can you tell us more about the course that this took?
Yeah. So let me think. Definitely the Palestinians within the 48 borders were much more integrated into Israeli society, and they spoke Hebrew. So all the people that were active within LGBT organizations were these people who were fluent in Hebrew, who fluent with the culture and everything. And perhaps, I don't have data on this, but perhaps these societies were also, maybe it was like easier to come out in these societies, less traditional. And I don't have a lot of data about the people coming from the outside the 48 lines. And I think the dynamics were that these people were much more active in the cruising grounds. Usually, a lot of them did not identify as gay. They just had sex with men without identifying. And a lot of or even most of the murders in these cases that I researched came from there, and they were very young. And yeah, and just about the language, again, we can talk about it for a long time afterwards. But I don't think Palestinian as a category has to do with religion. So there are definitely Christians and Muslims who identify as Palestinian. And yeah, language, both in the national aspect and in the queer aspect, is always tricky, whether you use queer or gay or whatever, and whether you use Arab or Palestinian into what specific time period. But I think also the distinction that everyone within the Israel borders is Arab Israeli and not Palestinian, and everyone outside of it is Palestinian, would not be true in description of how the people thought of themselves. So yeah.
This question's for me. In your introductory remarks, you said something about pinkwashing and the idea that there are other countries in the region where queers can live.
No, the opposite.
So yeah, can you?
So I don't know about.
I mean, I thought that Israel really is the only place that LGBTQ people can have a fairly
I
thick
think
life.
Israel really wants to present itself. So the situation in Israel is not bad. We can live there, and there are a lot of good aspects of it. But I think Israel really wants to portray itself as kind of a beacon of progressiveness, although a lot of struggles that have already been won in a lot of other countries, not even Western countries, haven't still been won in Israel. Yeah, so marriage is just one example. So yeah, I think if Israel wanted,
You're talking about other countries in the region and
no,
in the Middle
the
East?
argument that Israel makes is that it's a beacon of light within a hostile Middle East. And I think if you want to present yourself this, at least give us all our rights, right? That's the minimum.
I see.
And I think it's the pinkwashing part of it is that it kind of Israel uses it to deflect the criticism that has nothing to do with queerness. That has to do with other policies that Israel.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Greg, it would be the last question in-house.
But I just.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adi.
Sorry, that wasn't my.
No, Adi, you. Yeah, he's saying as well.
My God.
And this will need to be the last question.
If it's okay, could I ask two, but you choose which one? Or no?
I
Okay.
don't mind.
Okay. So my first of all, thank you for being here and for all your truth telling. It's really a honor. So first of all, I'm curious about kind of the reception of your podcast and your touring, and kind of your hopes for that project. Those
Khamsa.
uh,
Khamsa, yeah. Khamsa, against the evil eye.
right, yes, okay. And all your hopes, but like who kind of comes to your tour groups? What have you been seeing about that in terms of how it's been living in Haifa, those projects? And then I guess I'm curious about the role of religion, Judaism, Islam, Christianity in the queer scene. Do you see that it's quite secular? Or how could that be part of the future? But curious as we go to more religious nationalism on all sides, how religion can also be a beacon, as we are in an LGBTQ synagogue, for also, dignity for all, and human rights and things like that.
Big questions. Yeah.
Choose which one. Yeah.
I'll try to be brief, Yeah. So the second one was about religion, and the first one was about the different programs. Yeah. So the podcast goes well. Yeah. Tune in, give us 5 stars or whatever. Press like and subscribe. No, but it goes well, and hopefully we have people listening. And yeah, just Khamsa. And for the tours, yeah, I give all kinds of different tours. Actually, the majority are not LGBT related. They're just like history tours and social, economic, political, urban planning, different types. But since the tours I give about Queer Haifa are through the Haifa Queer History Project, and since there is no one else giving these tours, they are quite popular. And when we do them several times a year, they are always, people are very interested. So this goes well, and people are, there's interest. Yeah, and about religion, yeah. I think religion it's a huge question, of course, but I think I'm not religious myself, but I do think religion has many facets to it. And they say Torah has 70 facets. And there is definitely this branch within both Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and also a lot of, even the Baha'is, that is not pro-LGBT. But in Israel, we do have religious groups that are pro-LGBT. Definitely within the Judaism, we have Bat Kol and Chevruta, so different religious groups. And also, when I worked in Iggy, I had a friend that was Muslim, and also were active within queer Muslim circles. So there's also this kind of thing. And I think this place is really an inspiration, because I feel in a way it's easier to be many different kinds of Jew here than in Israel. It's an absurd, but I feel it's true. And it's hard to imagine this kind of place, in Israel, with all the attack the reform movement gets, and I think even more and more. So yeah, I think if this place can be a kind of a beacon of a light, that shines onto Israel, and not only Jerusalem being the beacon of light to the world, it would be good. I really would want to see this kind of space. And in Haifa, I have to say that we do have a reform community in Haifa that are just the sweetest people. And they do have like Pride Shabbats, and they were very influential in the history of the community during the 90s and the early 2000s. And they're very supportive. And their rabbi, the female rabbi, she's great. And she made a Tfilat HaDerech for the Pride Parade. And for several years, they read Tfilat HaDerech for the Pride Parade in the beginning of the Pride Parade in Haifa. So that was very moving.
Okay, I'm going to take the privilege of the final question,
Yeah.
okay? And again, drawing somewhat on your introduction to your talk. After 2 heartbreaking years, recent days have brought long-awaited relief. The living hostages have come home. The fire has largely ceased, and there is a glimpse of what peace and healing could look like. Does this and perhaps the geopolitical changes in the region give you hope for the future?
Yeah, well, we had a very long talk about this at your house. I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel that these past 2 years, I have grown almost immune to hope, because every time it seemed like it was nearing the end and then not, and then nearing the end and then not. And you become very cautious about being hopeful. So I am still very cautious about being hopeful, and I really want to see that this is really the end, and the fighting doesn't start again. And I find a lot of hope in certain people, in groups within the society, both the Jewish and the Palestinian. I have very little trust and very little hope in the leadership in both the Palestinian and the Jewish side. And I feel that they point us towards destructive, horrible places. And I feel like there is too much support of too much parts of society in this direction. So I don't know. I'm partly hopeful. Definitely, the situation now is better than a few weeks ago, but still, there has been so much suffering, so much death, and it doesn't feel, my wish was that it will be like in the end of The Wizard of Oz, that you just kill the bad witch and then, the curse lifts, and or maybe not The Wizard of Oz, every legend, basically, every fairy tale. And then, it just becomes better in an instant, but it's not the reality. The reality that the processes that happen in these past 2 years really crept into society. And I think we will have to face them. And I feel that, I don't know about the Palestinian society, maybe that's a problem there too, but I feel probably it's a problem there too. But definitely in the Israeli society that I know very well, there's a huge problem of denialism. And I feel that until people are able to face kind of what happened in these past 2 years, healing won't really start. Yeah, this is my view.
Please join me. Thank you, Dotan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody on Zoom and in person. This is great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Been great for me as well.